I know Representative Gary Click, one of really the best in the country, of course in the state of Ohio, but across the nation. And yeah, absolutely.
And we're going to have Representative Click and Klopfenstein for sponsored testimony.
But there's no more local control than Bob and Betty Buckeye.
Well, that explains why he keeps saying, well, that's not the way Representative Click does it.
I'm not supposed to get emotional, but I am.
Then we sat down with Click to discuss his bill and the controversy surrounding it.
And the chair would like to invite Representative Click to present testimony.
The question is, shall the bill pass? The chair recognizes Representative Click.
Welcome back to What's Clicking with State Representative Gary Click. I'm Janae Myers, his legislative aide. Today, we will be talking about HB 162, My Child, My Chart. Representative, do you want to fill us in on what this bill covers?
Well, thank you, Janae, and it's good to be back, and we're getting some positive input on what's clicking on our little podcast. And so
yes, we are.
I'm excited about that. We're accomplishing what we're setting out to accomplish, is just keeping our community informed on this. And My Child, My Chart, that's just really a grassroots. I mean, you can't get more grassroots. It's just moms mainly, but some dads too saying, hey, what's going on here? And so we took that, we worked with our Legislative Services Commission. We put together some legislation on that, but there's a couple moms that we have to talk to today, Jocelyn Patel and Katie DeLand, who are some of the ones who were affected by just not having access to their children's My Chart. And so we worked with Democrats on this as well. This is very bipartisan. I think, what was the vote on that, Janae?
87-6.
87-6. Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, even, one or two of the 6 that voted no, they called me later and they said, I was almost a yes. And, if I'd have known 1 or 2 more things that I didn't know, I would have actually been a yes. And so they weren't hard nosed. And even, one of the people who stood up, there was only one person who stood up in opposition. And that person who stood up in opposition, actually, I told them later, it was the nicest no vote speech I've ever heard. Because even though she voted no, she really did see a lot of the value in the bill. And there was just some technical reasons, and we're disappointed that she was a no, but that didn't stand in the way of us having a very strong support for this bill. And then we just as a side note, we did get Keith's law signed into law.
Yes, we did.
This last week. So we were with the governor, and we will have Keith on real soon. I think we're scheduling him, and we'll have a little celebration podcast on that, and we're glad, and we got some pictures in the newsletter. So if you're not on our newsletter, be sure to reach out and make sure you get signed up to be on the newsletter. But I think we ought to just get into this conversation with who are we talking to again?
Katie DeLand and Jocelyn Patel. Let's jump into it.
All right. We are back again on What's Clickin', and this is the official podcast of State Representative Gary Click, yours truly. And I have 2 moms with me today to talk about a very important bill that is making some progress. It just passed out of committee, and it's headed to the House floor real soon. In fact, by the time you catch this podcast, it might have already passed out of the House and be on its way to the Senate, because we record at least a week in advance, usually maybe a week and a half or 2 weeks sometimes. So I have with me today Jocelyn Patel and Katie DeLand, and we're talking about My Child, My Chart. And what we found out just from different moms across the aisle, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, didn't really matter, is that I had moms, even a mom in a restaurant in Columbus realized I was a state rep, and she came to me and she put her hands on her hips and she says, did you realize that I lost access to My Child's My Chart? And she had to give me permission to see what was going on, and she was pretty much in a huff about that. And I kept hearing from different places about it. And so I said, we need to address this. And so I worked with our Legislative Services Commission. We drafted a bill called My Child, My Chart. Started last year, didn't get across the finish line last year. And then we reintroduced it this year. And I know Katie DeLand here was running into some problems. I saw some of her comments on Facebook. She reached out to me and she said, hey, Gary, what about this? And I said, well, the good news is we already have a bill in the works. And she said, yay. And then she started telling her friends because she ran into a lot of friends on social media that were having some of the same issues. So, Katie, let's start with you. Tell us what problem you ran into with your children. Tell us how
Sure.
many children you
Yeah, I'm a
have,
mom of 5
their
in a
ages, and
rural
so forth. And
area,
tell us
small
about the
town.
issue that you
Fortunate
ran
to
into.
have pretty healthy kids, so don't have a lot of I feel like my kids aren't toddlers anymore, so the sickness era is over, so we really only go in for well child or when something is, kind of acute. Um, but my oldest at the time, he's 17 now, he was 14 or 15. Um, in the middle of wrestling season, he needed to be seen, brought him in, it was treated, went back to life, and, you know, because life is crazy, actually totally forgot about the appointment. Never crossed my mind. I never got a follow up invoice or any sort of reminder to pay that deductible for the sick child visit. And in August, so February, August, I started getting debt collector calls. And, at first you think they're just a scam because that's also our world. And we don't typically ever not pay our bills. We're pretty responsible people. And the debt collectors, they could only tell me a little bit of information, but they alluded to that it was a appointment for Samuel DeLand, which is my son. Again, super confused, pulled up my chart. And that was when I first realized that I didn't have access to Sam's account. I didn't have access to my daughter Maggie's, my son Charlie's. And that just set me off because they are trying to hold me financially responsible for a bill that I can't even access. My chart showed a $0 balance that I owed. They couldn't give me any of the information that I was paying for. It would be like going to a restaurant and you're paying a bill for food that they won't even tell you what you ordered. And it was insane. It was just an insane policy. And they told me that at age 12, my healthcare system, which is Premier, located in the Dayton region, that's the age that they had decided that they would remove a child from their parents' account and I could give my child the phone to let them give me proxy permission. And again, this is the world we live in, and it just did not sit well with me. Out of principle and stubbornness and everything else, I said, I am absolutely not going to ask my child to give me proxy permission to pay for their healthcare. When we hold the insurance, we are the only legal adults in this house. I mean, on a number of different facets, it makes no sense. So I posted something on Facebook, and that's when it blew up. Moms across the state, across demographics, across partisan philosophies, they all agreed like, this
Mhm.
is insane. This is absolutely insane. And that's when I found out about your bill the first time. Really had never had to follow it because, again, I didn't think it was relevant to me. So I very much appreciate that you had the foresight and were already working on it. And I was glad to join in and support your efforts.
And I thank you for coming to the house and giving testimony on that bill. And as we said, it passed out at committee this week, should get to the House floor. And now I also have Jocelyn on with me. And Jocelyn, until I retired from pastoring, you worked for me. You were my secretary, also teaching in our Christian school. And you've got 4 wonderful young ladies in your home. And then your husband, he's kind of, yeah, no, he's great. And he's our youth pastor. But you came to me also saying that you ran into a similar situation, not exactly the same, but just access to your daughter's My Chart. Can you tell us about that? Tell us how that went down.
Yeah, so my oldest was needing an ankle surgery from a basketball injury, and she was 13 at the time. It was just before her 14th birthday, and we had a video conference call with her doctor just to finalize everything for her surgery. And so I pulled her out of class. We went to my husband's office, pulled up my phone, and got into the My Chart, clicked into her name, and there was no link there for the video chat. So I frantically called the doctor because they're an hour's drive away from us. It's not like I could just go up to the office. And so I called them and I said, there's not a link for the video conference. And she said, well, it's in your daughter's MyChart account. I said, I'm in her MyChart account. I have all 4 of my girls' MyCharts within my MyChart. And she was like, well, no, it's in her own personal access. And I said, she doesn't have a login. She's never created a login or anything. And so they had sent the link to her email, which was a school email. And we were able to finally access it, but they said she has to give you permission to access her MyChart. And I said, she's 13 years old. She's under my insurance. She's in my home. Why does she have to give me permission? And they said, well, it's something new that's happening. And so you'll find as all of your girls come of age, they'll all have to give you access to their MyChart. I said, I don't think so. So I came to you and told you, this is an issue because they're still in my house and I pay their bills. So a similar situation as Katie there, but a little bit different in the fact that we were preparing for a surgery and almost didn't get to have the pre-op appointment because we couldn't get access to her MyChart to get the link.
And nobody warned you that this was
No.
coming up or that this was happening or told you anything about it. And so it's the law does not require them to do that. And each provider, each informatics system does their own thing and they figure it out. But the reason that they do that, and this is why we are doing as much as we can on the state level with this bill, because it involves HIPAA. And HIPAA is federal law, and we cannot change on the state level. We cannot change federal law. The federal law needs to change, but that's not something we can do. So we're just doing what we can do here on the state level. And that is to make sure that parents have information and opportunity ahead of time instead of waiting to a crisis, instead of waiting till your daughter's got surgery the next day, or instead of waiting until, oh, I got this bill and I don't know what it's for. And so what the bill says is that each year your provider must certify to you that there are actually 8 things. So there are 8 things that your child can do in Ohio without your consent. And according to HIPAA, if you don't have to consent, then you don't have a right to know. And so what they were doing to make it easy is just all at once, because they didn't want to violate HIPAA. They're just, okay, about the age that your child might start doing some of these things, then they're just cutting the parents off. They're not saying, hey, we just want to let you know. They're just doing it. And so what MyChart says is that every year, the primary care physician for your child must certify to you these 8 things that your child can do without your permission. We're not changing any of those things, and maybe some of those things will be a discussion later. That's not what we're trying to tackle in this bill. All we're trying to do is make sure parents know, parents are informed, and parents have an opportunity to act. So each year at a wellness checkup or whatever, but at least annually, they have to certify to you, here's the things your child can do without your consent, and you will not have access to their MyCharts. And so then what that gives you the opportunity as a parent to say, okay, Billy or Bobby or Susie or whoever, sign this paper. And that child can sign that paper and grant you access. So I know that you still don't like that. I still don't like that a child has to give their parents permission. I don't like that. I don't have the power to change that at the state level. But what I can do is make sure you're informed so that you can have that conversation with your children in advance. You can get their signature in advance, and then you don't lose the access to that child's MyChart, and you're not just slapped in the face with it the day before surgery or when you get a bill from the provider. And so that is how we take care of it. And the things that they can do are, quite frankly, one of the things is so benign as to donate blood. They don't need your permission to do that. And I don't know why that is. Honestly, if my child's giving blood, I'd like to know about that. If they come home and pass out in the middle of the day, well, I'd like to be able to provide consent to that. But there are also things such as they can get tested for STDs, they can get tested for AIDS and things like that. And for some people, that's important that they have that privacy. I just like to be in communication with my kids and know those things all ahead of time and just have that open relationship with my children. Of course, my children are all grown right now, but also to get tested for a rape kit and things like that. And one of the concerns that some people have had is, well, what if the abuser is a family member? And sadly, we know that very often it is a family member. And so they said, well, what about that? If the child signs off and they have access, and then there's a family member doing this, and the reality is we checked into that with our Legislative Services Commission. We had some research done, and federal law already permits the provider to withhold any information like that they think would be detrimental or harmful to the child if they knew it. And so if a father is the one who is causing the problem and they go get tested or something like that, they can withhold that information in those certain circumstances. So this bill is not perfect. It does not solve every single aspect of the problem, but it does at least create awareness among parents so that you can act in advance. And then if we're going to change anything else on that, it's going to have to be done at the federal level. So hopefully we're getting that done very soon in the House. Hopefully by the time that you hear the podcast, this bill will already have passed from the House and gone to the Senate. So let me just ask you, Katie, what are some things you would say to the Senate
Well,
as they
before even
receive
that,
this
I
bill?
do think that,
Why should they support this bill? What should
just
they do
like,
with it?
legislative pressure is real. And so I mentioned that my healthcare system is Premier, and I actually know the nursing supervisor at Premier, and I've caused enough of a stink, internally, and called them and all the stuff. That's why my kids call me a Karen. And they told me 2 weeks ago, cardigan, usually I have a cardigan on, not today.
Cardigan,
But
Karen,
I
to be
was told 2
exact.
weeks ago by the Premier nursing manager that this was a project that Premier internally designated as a quarter 3 priority. So again, they've been watching your bill. They know that the hammer's coming down, and they've drugged their feet, and now they're going to fix it themselves. So again, kind of, maybe your bill isn't perfect. I still don't love everything about it, but I think for me, it served its purpose because it sounds like Premier is reversing their policy on this. So I think one way or the other, there
Mm-hmm.
will be change imparted, and I am very appreciative for that. But to the Senate, I would say, just take off your partisan hats, take off all of these. And I've heard the opposition and the opponent testimony, and you can get very nuanced, and they can use great jargon and protections for kids. But it's not lost on us, especially in recent years, what seems to be the ulterior motive here. In a very prime, vulnerable age of kid and adolescent development, that's when they decide and choose to drive that wedge of information transparency between a parent and a child. Um, so it's not a coincidence. To me, I think there are medical protections for practitioners and um, required, they have taken an oath, they have their protections. If they see some sort of abuse going on, they have a reporting duty. And so some of the opposition that I've heard, in committee, and then just
Right.
me in conversation, to me still doesn't pass muster. And I think that, the real reason here is to do exactly what we're seeing in so many other
Right.
walks of life, is just to drive that wedge between kids and their parents. At a time when kids need their parents the most.
And I'm going to try to say, best case scenario, give everyone the benefit of the doubt. I think that many times they are actually just trying to protect themselves from lawsuits and things like that because of the HIPAA laws and so forth. So I'm not going to ascribe, bad motives, but everyone can look at this the way they want to. But I do know that I've had some conversations with some people that I typically don't agree with on the other side of the aisle on different things, and they have come along and they have supported this. And some of them are more to the left than others. I know Representative Crystal Lett is a Democrat. This bill's actually very important to her because she has a special needs child, and it's very important for her to stay in touch with that child. So she's really been advocating for this. I know Rep. Baker is a Democrat. She asked some of the tough questions last year, but she actually voted for it in committee this year. I've had some conversations with Rep Samani, who, we disagree on a lot of things, but she's actually supporting the bill. I'm grateful that we did bring some Democrats along. We made a couple minor changes along the way, and most of those were just technical with the informatics system so that they can better accommodate the language of the bill. But we're excited. Jocelyn, what do you want to add before we wrap up here today?
I would say just again, like Katie said, remove your partisan hat and think of this as it affects your family dynamic. Anytime you try to take authority away from somebody who is over a child, it interrupts the family dynamic. And by trying to take away a parent's right to see their children's medical information, you're usurping authority over the parent, in my opinion. And it's kind of like Katie said, these are my kids. I'm raising them.
Right.
And I know that not every family is open like my family is, but my girls have a very open relationship with my husband and I. If there's a problem, they do tell us. And not every family is lucky to have that. But in the end, I think what frustrated me the most is the fact that the access was denied without there was no warning whatsoever. I just went to go do an appointment like we'd done before and the access was gone. And so making sure that parents are informed, because these are our children and their health is very important to us, or else we wouldn't be wanting to get into their My Chart. We want to make sure that our children are taken care of and that their bills are paid. So just making sure that you're not interrupting the natural flow of a family by instilling things that
That's
are
exactly right, Jocelyn.
outside of your boundaries.
I feel the same way. It was a complete
Very
surprise,
good.
blindsided. I mean, no warning,
And
no explanation, no heads up. Hey, we're removing, to find that your healthcare system just autonomously chose the age of 12, in my case, to remove that. And again, I think the argument, it's me at this point. We're responsible for paying essentially like writing a blank check. They can't tell you what you're paying for. It's to me, it's a little bit indefensible. When you really get into the crux of it, it's hard to argue.
it is. It is. And so we are doing, what we can on the state level. And there's only just a certain limit to what we can do as it relates to HIPAA. But I think, the next step might be for some folks who think that maybe it needs more attention and maybe we want to add further securities to making sure that, parents have access to the child's My Chart. Might require some lobbying on the federal level and getting hold of some of our congressmen and our senators to say, hey, this is an issue that needs to be dealt with. So that's where I would kind of suggest going to next. But we're at least going to make sure with this that parents are not blindsided. We're just going to make sure that parents are not blindsided, that they have that information and they can respond to that in a timely manner instead of waiting to the last minute. So thank you, ladies, for your advocacy. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for joining me on the program, What's Clickin'? And
Thanks,
we'll
Rep.
see
Click.
you
Thanks,
around
Jocelyn.
around town or around the State House on other issues, I'm sure, soon.
Yeah, thank you too.
Well, that was so great to hear. I'm so glad this bill has passed the House floor and is now headed to the Senate. It sounds like both Katie and Jocelyn had some very helpful things to say.
They
But
did.
listeners, we are going to have a mailbag podcast. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
it's coming up. And if somebody wants to be a part of that, they can tag, just put in the subject line, the mailbag, or if they want to call, the best times calls on the weekends to leave a voicemail. And, of course, you don't have to say that we're going to just draw from some of the comments we've already had. We'll protect people's anonymity. We're not going to throw you out here online if you reach out to our office, unless you tell us explicitly, hey, you can use my name and et cetera. We're not going to do that. I don't think that's appropriate, but to share some of the feedback that we're getting, whether it's through a voicemail or through our emails, and you can get that information in our closing credits, but it's rep88 at ohiohouse.gov or 614-466-1374. And we'll share that again with you in the closing. But you can call, leave a voicemail on the weekends, or just shoot us an email, and you might be included in the mailbag. But got to keep it short. You can't go like on for 20 minutes on a voicemail. That's not going to happen. But yeah.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm super excited. But this coming week's podcast is about House Bill 393. Representative Brewer was on, I believe, along with two others. Representative Click, do you want to fill in the listeners a little bit?
Yes, and so we're going to have Representative Brewer, who's a friend of mine across the aisle. Yeah, he and I lead the Ohio House Community Revitalization Committee. I am the chairman. He is the ranking member. And so the chairman always comes from the majority party. The ranking member is always the top Democrat or top legislator from the minority party. And he and I work together very well and keeping the wheels on the bus, so to speak. We've got a great committee. And so he and I are actually working together on this bill that just helps people as they're coming out of community-based correctional facilities. And CBCFs is what they call them. And what we're trying to do is just make sure that they have all the tools that they need to reintegrate into society, to gain employment, and to have access to the things that they need to prevent recidivism in all actuality. Because if they can't get back into society, they're much more likely to go back to the same things that got them incarcerated in the first place. And this process is already in place for our state prisons, but somehow when that legislation was drafted, the CBCFs did not get included. It was just an oversight, and they said, "Hey, can we have some of that?" And Rep. Brewer and I said, "Well, why not?" And so we're including them in that, and we'll talk about that in our next episode.
Do you want to give the listeners a little clip?
Let's do it.
So that was the problem that I brought up to you, and then I believe we spent a couple months going back and forth about some language and things.
I think that House Bill 393 is going to fill a gap, because what the state did last year was great, right? When 315 passed, it required prisons to do exactly what your guys' bill is trying to do for CBCFs, but it left a gap because CBCFs are prison diversion, and so you have an entire population of people who aren't necessarily transitioning out of prison with that mandate and that identification, but they're prison eligible.
That's why this bill is one of those easy fix that you discovered, and you not only work on this bill, the other bills to help other people get a second chance. But yes, this is one of these easy fix.
Yeah, we're actually working on a CQE bill. What we're doing with House Bill 393 is to make sure that these individuals can get their state IDs before they leave, instead of waiting for a long time and going through all the hoops after they leave. And we think this is going to help those folks who are returning back into society.
You've been listening to What's Clickin', the official podcast of State Representative Gary Click, covering Ohio's 88th House District. That includes Seneca and Sandusky counties in Northwest Ohio. I'm Janae Myers, his legislative aide. If you would like to reach out to us, you can send us an email at rep88, that's REP88, at ohiohouse.gov, or you can give us a call at 614-466-1374. Thanks again for joining us for What's Clickin' with State Representative Gary Click. We'll be back again soon to let you know what's clickin' in